So you might be thinking, who determined what was women's work? And like, where does this come from? So our research actually tells us that jobs seen as women's work are often undervalued because they are parallel to the domestic work women are expected to do for free.
Expected to do for free.
Welcome to The Scaries, brought to you by Racer Co. I'm Sky.
And I'm Talitha. We are proudly broadcasting from Treaty 4 territory, and in each episode we tackle alarming, inconceivable, questionable, shocking, and scary statistics relating to, impacting, and intervening with the lives of women and girls worldwide.
You'll hear the scary truth, take away tools and tips, and learn what you can do about it. And The Scaries is an opportunity to raise awareness, share resources, and collectively use our power as women and supporters of women to make some real change. So we'd also like to know, this is a disclaimer we say at every episode, that these views that are shared are our own opinions, and this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Also, we likely will be sharing some potentially triggering content and statistics, so just listen with caution.
As straight, cisgender, white, able-bodied settler women, we are aware of the privilege we have, and we want to use this platform to spread awareness about the scary reality women from around the world face in different life situations.
Why?
Because sometimes nothing is scarier than being a woman. What is up? We are rolling into episode 4, which seems pretty wild. We've made it 4 episodes.
Feels good.
I feel like when it's like episode 100, we're going to be like LOL at episode 4, but it's a big accomplishment. We are drinking wine. It is not 10 a.m. We've moved our recording times to a little bit later because we've now feel like we're practically experts at this.
Oh, yeah.
And also it's just been a really long week. So even if it was 10 a.m., I don't think you should judge us.
The hefty glasses.
The large glass of wine. But we've also earned it. So
always.
There we go. Today we are going to be talking about what seems like an age-old discussion. I think maybe when I even first started to like learn about the disparities between men and women, this is one of the first things that came up and like that I've ever known about. And that thing is the gender pay gap and pay inequities. And we're going to be talking about how we got here a little bit, what that looks like, and what we can do about it in 2023. It's pretty astounding that this gap and inequities are still a thing and far from being closed, especially here in Canada, despite a recent surge in more women in leadership and decision-making roles, which we've seen a massive influx in our city, actually, with a large number of CEO roles of large companies being taken over by women this year.
Woo!
Yeah, great. Woohoo! Cheers! Celebrations. In Canada, women still make 89 cents for every dollar that a man makes. And we are going to get more in on that in a minute. But there are many variables at play for how this statistic is generated, which we will get into, and many factors that contribute to why this gap still exists. So I think it's maybe important to find out why we decided to do this episode. And I know, Sky, you have a little bit of a personal story.
Yeah. Well, I'm currently on maternity leave, so I'm in the midst of starting to apply for jobs and thinking about all the anxiety of going back to work in a couple months. And I just know because this is my second mat leave that I'm going to have a gap in my resume, and I've missed out another year of experience, of things to add to my resume, of building, whatever it is in my career path. And
however, I would interrupt and say that you've like done certificates and done so
true.
many
Well,
things.
I always try, but that's the thing. Like, why do I feel like I have to prove myself well on mat leave? Like, it's not like I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs. It is not a vacation for all the people who think it is. It is not.
Not with 2, especially.
No. Hell no. I honestly, going back to work is way easier than being on mat leave. I'll tell you that right now. I don't care where I'm working. It is.
Yeah.
So shout out to all the stay-at-home moms because I'm telling, and dads because
you are the hero.
It is a lot.
Yes.
Anywho, but like I'm starting to think about what it's going to be, and I just know that I'm going to likely have to prove and negotiate, that wage that I'm looking for, even similar or close to or above what I was at before. And it's going to be tough. And I know that because I've done it already once for my first mat leave. And when I think about this gap, because I was a leader in like a management position and I've reviewed lots of resumes, and I never ever think of a gap. It's like, oh, what is this? Like they weren't working for like a year or a couple months. Like what's going on?
Right.
But I honestly think we as women should, especially moms, should put that, if you have that gap, should say like maternity leave, this is my gap, but this is what I did.
Totally.
Like I actually, these are the skills that I've gained. I have gained more skills as a mom than than any other role that I could ever imagine taking on.
Oh, yeah.
I've gained those skills, and they are probably the most valuable skills at home, in the workforce, as a leader, than anything else that I have. Like patience, general leadership in general, integrity, all kinds of things. And you're teaching that to other kids to create them to be leaders. So it's a whole saga. But I saw this thing on Instagram, I think early on this mat leave. And it made me laugh, but it also made me like, this is so true, that it was like something to the effect of, managers, if you're sifting through resumes and you see a gap in someone's resume from a mat leave, hire them. Like, don't wait, hire them right now, because you know who gets shit done? Women, moms get shit done.
Yes.
Women get shit done. And honestly, I was like, amen to that, because that is so true.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know, like, that anxiety on top of, to be honest, I have had some roles, especially early on in my career, where I did see the gender gap. And I don't think I noticed it then, but I notice it now, especially as I go through this research we'll be sharing. But I've been in roles early on where I've literally been the boss. I've been the direct manager to men, and they were making more than me. And I know that because I was their direct manager, and I was seeing their, doing their performance reviews and doing negotiating raises. They made more than me. And this was in a union environment. So of course, seniority, of course, blah, blah, blah. But they still made more. Like, that is not cool. It goes beyond salary as well, which we'll get into, and some of those other ancillary benefits that pay into your full-on compensation package. But yeah, those are just some of the pieces that I brought up. And now that I think about it, I was young, and I knew this wasn't quite right, but you fear like losing your job or being laughed at or being, like, what are you going to do about it, kind of thing. And like, honestly, if I went to my boss at the time and said like, this isn't cool, why is this happening? And they laughed at me, I'd probably be like, hey, I have to quit. Like, my morals are telling me I have to quit, and then I don't have a job, and then it's scary, and your job, like, it's a whole thing. So like, bottom line, this still exists. And we hear a lot of people be like, no, like, there's so many women I work with a woman and she makes more than me. Well, great, but that's not what we're comparing here. Like, there's all kinds of factors, and there are many factors that go into this pay gap. But these examples that I'm sharing are literally within the last 5 to 10 years. So this pay gap is alive and well. And like Talitha said, it's still there. We're 10 cents in Canada, 10 cents less than what men make. Pretty much. Where's that extra dime going? I don't know.
That adds up over time. And
totally.
Like, I saw one, I mean, this is not part of our actual statistics, but like one very small stat was that over time, like, women will make in their like working career $500,000 less than men. And then like when you add on like the intersectionalities of it, so this is particularly in the States, Black women earned almost $1 million less in their career. So like whatever their career is, I mean, that's obviously average too. So yeah, $1 million, like, that's
boggling, mind-boggling. So
well, thank you for sharing, Sky. And I know that that's like such a hard thing to go through, especially when you like question your own worth as you're applying for a job. And I know that we've talked about, maybe not even on here, but like in our work that we do with Raise Her, that women often don't even apply for jobs that they like aren't like 95% qualified for, whereas men apply like generally when they're like 40% qualified. And so like even getting past that, almost like imposter syndrome, and then having to like validate why you were and qualify why you were off for a year and like
totally
just hanging out at home and like watching soaps. She wishes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess it's, as we do, we always start with kind of like what the definition is and the history. So what exactly is the gender pay gap? What is pay equity, and how are they calculated? Let's get into that. So first, let me explain the difference between pay gap and pay equity. So the gender pay gap, or gender wage gap, is the difference between the average wages earned by men and the average wages earned by women. So pay equity, on the other hand, is equal pay for work of equal value, which I will define more thoroughly in a moment. Although the term wage gap and pay equity are frequently used interchangeably, they are not the same thing. And so it's first important to note that.
Mhm.
So let's start with the pay gap. The pay gap usually refers to the median, unadjusted, uncontrolled pay gap. So when we look at the pay gap information as a way to tell how balanced companies are at the top, where they are typically fewer but maybe higher paid individuals, versus at the bottom where there tend to be more people but at a lower pay. One quote I found says that the pay data shows us quite literally how companies assign value to their employees through the roles they inhabit and the pay they receive.
Mhm.
Much of the national gender pay gap is because women overall work lower paying jobs than men and are less represented in those higher levels of business. So like in the C-suite, in those decision-making roles
sure.
that we said, which is obviously due to a mix of root causes, including unequal access to jobs, promotions, opportunities to collaborate on high profile projects, pay differentials across gendered job functions. So like, for example, IT roles are traditionally more male dominated and often pay more than HR roles, which are traditionally more female dominated. And then of course the negative impacts of on salaries, advancement, and tenure due to factors such as caregiving responsibilities. A 22 Statistics Canada report noted that more men are employed full-time compared to women, and more women are employed part-time compared to men.
Mhm.
And this could partially be a result of the fact that more of women's time is taken up by unpaid work than men. So women spend on average of 3.6 hours or 15% of their day on unpaid domestic and care work compared to the average of 2.4 hours or 10% of the day that men spend on unpaid work.
Mhm. I believe it.
It's just like, amen, sister.
You know what? I was talking to someone, I forget who it was, and I'm going to kick myself for not remembering, but about how women are like today. So back in like the 50s, the 60s, women were like stay at home, like all stay at home. We didn't work. There wasn't really a choice. Even if you did, it was like nurse,
That was
teacher,
the job.
that was it.
Yeah.
But now you're expected to work, or you have to work, because let's be honest, like this economy doesn't allow for a lot of single income families. And you are still, but all those job duties at home don't go away. So you have two jobs, literally, and you're expected to be amazing at both of them and not drop any balls. Whereas back in the day, like, yes, it was super hard staying at home, but that was your job. You didn't have to worry about showing up and doing and all the other things at work on top of your household duties, which they never go away. They don't. So it's like, we're almost setting women up for like, no wonder everyone's so burnt out nowadays, right? Like,
especially with kids. Yeah,
totally. Anyway, I just had to chime in because I'm just like, we can't do like super woman ideal is like, let's stop glamorizing that, because that's not.
Yeah,
it's making it hard for everyone else who can't do it all well to do it.
Yeah, like,
so let's just glamorize like dirty homes. And
can we please?
McDonald's
what you can't see
supper.
Behind the camera is absolute chaos.
Right. Oh no,
but
it's not.
No, but like, I think also even with that, it's when women are like, when people are like, you're such a hero, thank you for doing it. And you're like, I don't want to be called a hero. I want like to take a nap and like wash my hair. And so yeah, it's like that de-glamorizing of that hustle culture, which I think is like just an overall issue in our society with parents, not parents, everybody. It's like, you need to do more and like be harder and work harder and like everything. Yeah.
Quote Barbie in that, whatever that monologue was from the Barbie movie.
Let's pretend that I'm going to read off that whole monologue, and that's what it is. So the gender pay gap can be calculated in two ways. So the controlled gap, quote unquote, measures the difference in pay between men and women performing the same job with the same experience and qualifications and all of that. The uncontrolled gender pay gap, also known as the opportunity pay gap, quote unquote, measures how women are paid compared to men holistically based on the median salary for men versus women. So both the uncontrolled and controlled pay gap are important for understanding how society values women. The opportunity gap is an indication of what types of jobs, and then those associated earnings, are occupied by women overall versus men overall. This in turn is an indicator of how wealth and power are gendered, and that women's roles are often less valued within our society. So that was the pay wage gap. Now going into pay equity, according to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, pay equity is about equal pay for work of equal value, as I mentioned. Pay equity is compensating people performing equal, substantially similar, or comparable work in a way that is not based on workers' gender or other protected category characteristics like race or ethnicity, but instead may be explained by neutral job-related factors that differentiate workers' skills, effort, accountability, and working conditions. So in the case of gender, for example, this is measured by statistically evaluating compensation by groups of similar workers. So like, for example, if we look at all engineers in the province and the country, and ruling out that the distribution of compensation for female workers is different than that of male workers after adjusting for different justifiable factors like experience and seniority and education and location and all that kind of stuff. Pay equity is most commonly analyzed on the basis of gender and or race and or ethnicity, but it can be compared across any demographic, including age, sexual orientation, ability, caregiving status, and the list goes on. And fun fact, actually, pay equity is internationally recognized as a fundamental human right. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Good.
So we actually have laws about this as well in Canada, not all countries.
Yeah.
But yes, Canada has laws about this. So equal pay for equal value, aka pay equity. We had these laws since the 1970s. So actually not that long if you think about it. So most recently, the law around this is the Pay Equity Act, which was passed by Parliament and received royal assent on December 13th, 2018. Again,
so like
not that long
ago. Yeah.
And came into force on August 31st, 2021. Again, 2 years ago. The purpose of this act is to achieve pay equity for employees in jobs that are commonly held by women. So specifically jobs that are commonly held by women by addressing gender-based discrimination in the pay practices and systems of employers, which is great.
Yeah. So they I think put it back on the employers of like, this is your job.
Yeah.
To make sure that this is being taken care of.
For sure.
Yeah. Which it should be. I mean, that's who's paying people. So to put this all into perspective for you, in 2023, for every $1 that men make, women earn 89 cents. This number represents the opportunity gap and comes from comparing the median salaries, as I mentioned, of men and women across all jobs. This is 1 cent nearer to closing the gender pay gap compared to last year. So yay us.
Woohoo!
We did it. 1 cent. The controlled gender pay gap, on the other hand, is 99 cents for every $1 that men make, which is close, but still not equal. And when we look at that, the controlled pay gap, even that 1 cent, that women earn compared to men when all oh my God, factors that you can get compensated on, wow, are accounted for. And exactly, I've had like 2 sips of wine and I'm like, woohoo!
Another one.
That all factors are accounted for and exactly the same, such as like job title, education, experience, industry, as I've already mentioned. So although that 99 cents may seem very close to $1, just 1 cent off, small differences in earnings on the dollar can compound over the course of a lifetime and a career. The gender pay gap should really just be 0. And it is not 0. That 1 cent makes a huge difference.
Totally.
And that's also just, again, those like very controlled groups. Like overall,
exactly.
It's
like exact same jobs versus the uncontrolled, which is like the median of salaries of men versus women.
Yeah.
So that really digs more into like the types of jobs that women are getting versus men.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and roles.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, because that makes so much more sense, especially when we get into debates of like, is this still there? And what's the difference? And it is very complex. Like it's not just cut and dry. What society has deemed as traditional women's work and female dominated industries and roles, those are typically lower, obviously we know this, lower compensated than traditional men's work or roles in industries that are more male dominated. So you might be thinking, who determined what was women's work and like, where does this come from? So our research actually tells us that jobs seen as women's work are often undervalued because they are parallel to the domestic work women are expected to do for free.
Expected to do for free.
So things like taking care of children or vulnerable people, seniors, serving people in the hospitality industry, teaching, nurses, teachers, all those things.
Yeah.
Typically female dominated industries, all
Mhm.
things that women are just expected to do for free. So why are we getting paid for them? So you should just pay less, right?
It's like I think I've heard it's like the 5 C's of something, and like that's like where women's roles typically fall into, or like the jobs that women typically fall into, which is like caring, cooking, and then the other 3 C's. But like it's all within that category of like this is where you need to be, which is keeping people alive, more or less.
And like no shade to any of those roles. Those are super. Of all course. Of those roles are very important.
Yeah.
And oftentimes women, like, there are natural compassionate natures,
course.
like aligned to them, so it's fine.
Mhm.
But why are we getting paid less for those roles?
That's the biggest question.
Yeah, that is the question.
The
why
issue.
Are those valued less than whatever IT or whatever else, engineering and male dominated areas? Yeah, I don't know. They're also the things that have the biggest impact on people, I find. Yeah, it's like this is the next generation, teaching, nursing, all the things.
Yeah.
But yet we're paying more for IT?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's because it's like those, like in that tech, and I think we probably do a whole episode on this.
Oh, yeah.
Like women in tech.
We will.
But it's like, that's women in STEM in particular, it's so hard for them to get it, not so hard, but like it's harder to get into because it's considered like a male industry with like math and science and all of those things. And so then when women come, they're like, I don't think you're smart enough to be here. And I mean, they are, but like they have to prove themselves that much harder to make it and stay there. And also because it's so male dominated, arguably it's probably more uncomfortable to be there as well if you're like the only one doing it. So it's like harder to keep them in.
It's essentially valuing one side of your brain as more important than the other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The math, the science, the language arts, the whatever other side. I forget all the pieces of that side, but they're 2 different sides.
Yeah.
And yeah. Anyway, we digress. So, and another factor in the overall pay gap is that women then work, like we talked about, more part-time for several reasons, like lack of affordable childcare, lack of family leave policies, social pressure to carry the bulk of the domestic responsibilities. So again, all these factors compound to create where we are today of this pay gap that has never closed. Like, it was wide and is slowly starting, and it's getting faster. It's closing faster as the years go on, but still not closed ever. It's never been closed. Let's be
she
clear
feels
there.
Spicy about this.
Yeah. Anyway, these factors make it more likely for women to have interruptions as well. Like I said, all those family leave, all those things, to have interruptions or absences from work, like I know all about. And they're linked to fewer opportunities for promotions and salary increases. Statistics Canada did a 10-year analysis of this, and they noted that nearly 2/3 of the studied gender pay gap is unexplained. 2/3 is unexplained. It doesn't have any reason for why.
So they're just like doing a study and they're like, oh, don't know.
No. For this portion, possible explanations include gender differences in the work experience, as well as unobservable factors such as gender-related biases. Also a thing that's never been gone and still perpetuated under unconscious biases, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, interesting. 2/3 of the gap are unexplained.
I mean, and like now I'm trying to like figure out a reason and explain it, but it's just, they're like, so there's obviously just no reason. So it is just like biases and people saying because you're a woman, you're going to earn less.
Or just thinking, you probably don't want to come back to work after you have kids, and you probably aren't going to work as hard. So I'm going to give the promotion to someone else who's probably a man that's not going on mat leave or whatever. So interesting. So let that simmer, and we're going to get into some scary statistics for you.
Here are some more scaries. So as I mentioned previously, according to Statistics Canada, female employees aged 25 to 54, so like the majority of the working population, earn 89 cents on the dollar compared to men in terms of their average hourly wage. There was a stat, or like I want to say like a meme circulating, but it was definitely like based on facts that was circulating on social media around November 22nd. So recently. Very recently, within the last couple of weeks. And on November 2nd is actually, or 22nd rather, is Equal Pay Day in the UK. And so this statistic and meme and whatever quote was in relation to that. And it said, from today, so November 22nd until 2024, so like a month and a half, women are effectively working for free thanks to the gender pay gap. And I saw that and I was like, what?
Seriously?
Like-
yeah, that really puts in perspective when it's
Like just
spelled out
working
like
for
that.
like a month and a half for free, like not getting paid. I mean, obviously we're getting paid, but like it's just that's like what
based on how much you make, you stop making, and then the men continue to make because of all the factors that we shared.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Fawcett Society, which is a charity in the UK campaigning for gender equity and for women's rights, said that this marks the day on which of the year where women effectively, on average, stop earning relative to men because of the ongoing difference. Yada, yada, yada. So yeah, it's great. It's good times. And get this. If trends continue, it will take around 131 years to close the gender pay gap worldwide. Like never in our lifetime. I mean, unless something crazy happens, but yeah, never in our lifetime will we ever see it.
Worldwide.
Yeah. So I mean, that's like obviously Canada, and we'll get into that. Canada is doing significantly better, but like to make sure that the entire world is equitably compensated based on their gender. I mean, we shouldn't be paid based on our gender, but if that's how it works, it's going to be 131 years. And so when we apply an intersectional lens to the gender pay gap for women, certain aspects of a woman's identity make the pay gap even worse. And sadly, these aspects are pretty much spot on with the same things that we talked about in episode 1 that make them at a higher target for intimate partner violence. A Census 2016 report showed that the following groups of women working full-time, full year earn significantly less than men. So let me just break it down for you. Indigenous women earn, on average, 35% less than non-Indigenous men, which equals to approximately 65 cents to the dollar.
So like half.
Pretty much.
What the hell?
Yeah. Racialized women earn, on average, 33% less than non-racialized men, or 67 cents to the dollar. Newcomer women earn on average of 29% less than non-newcomer men, or 71 cents to the dollar. Women with disabilities overall have lower incomes compared to women without disabilities and men with or without disabilities. And lastly, those identify as 2S LGBTQIA+ also experience significant pay gaps in Canada. Just as a very brief overview, heterosexual men are found to earn the most, followed by gay men, lesbian women, and then bisexual men, and lastly, bisexual women. And this stat doesn't even include the other categories within the queer community who arguably face even more inequities. And yeah.
What is it about bisexual people?
Yeah, they
were the highest into, I think, cyber violence and intimate partner violence.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah,
what?
It's so specific. I'm not, and I mean, maybe we have to dig into that, but like, I don't understand why that stat keeps coming up, especially like in the intersectional lens.
When you pull that out, when you dig out, like look at the whole 2S LGBTQIA+, and that is the one that, and I'm sure we didn't talk about trans or any of those other things in there, but like, come on. What?
Oh yeah. Like, I think that they would be like trans people and like other folks who are within the queer community who again haven't been identified within this statistic are, I would say, get paid even lower. I mean,
who knows? But
just
yeah,
based on this, based on this information, the math ain't mathin'. Yeah.
So all of these things are still happening despite the girl power movement that we all have had, like all those 90s chickies and 80s chickies, more that we grew up with, and more women, like we all have been noticing, coming into leadership positions, also in politics. We've seen a lot more, I would say, more prominence of women in these roles. We still haven't closed this gap. And we've shared a lot of the reasons why. There's lots of complex factors that go into it. A lot of it's the systematic pieces that are underscoring why is this not closing. But to that effect, it goes beyond your HR team. So you might be thinking, oh, it's just my work. It's not. Like, it's not just where you are. If it is where you are, speak up about it. Don't let us hold you back. But it goes beyond your HR teams. It goes beyond your personal boss. It's those societal factors and really the expectations of gendered fields of study and work. And this has caused, like we talked about, that ever looming unconscious gender biases that exist. And you ever want to learn about gender biases, hit us up, because we're happy to share this, get into more detail and do any kind of training on
Send a DM.
Yeah. But that is it. Those gender biases are the things that create these ideals in our brain that this is women's work, this is men's work, or there's a glass ceiling for
Mhm.
women versus men. Women can't take on these types of roles in an organization. So it's really the deep-rooted factor that's holding us back, that these unconscious biases haven't been identified and haven't gone away. And no one's really being held accountable for them.
Yeah.
So, and the sad part is that our research tells us that women today are doing all the things that they can be doing to contribute to be contributing members of the economy. They're doing more in terms of education than men. In fact, in 2021, women outnumber men in pursuing university degrees. So that should equate to, being having more education. Why aren't we getting, those high-paying jobs?
It's because you have too many feelings.
Yeah.
That's why, and your period might impact something.
And so despite that fact, women who graduate university with a bachelor's degree earn on average around $69,000 annually, while men who graduate with a bachelor's degree earn $97,000 annually.
Oh my God. What?
Is it because they're going in a certain field, probably male-dominated field, or is it not?
Yeah.
Are they just, I don't know.
But yeah, that's not
know.
pay equity. That's the pay gap. So like that's looking at like
that's
just
that
like
uncontrolled factor of median role.
Yeah.
Or median salary.
Yeah.
Sorry, my nose is running, so I can't. It's time of year. Further to that, a self-report survey from women from 2021 looked at pre-tax salaries. And it looked at how women remain 21% lower than men in their pre-tax salaries and other aspects of their compensation, like we talked about, like bonuses, profit sharing, equity agreements. That is really where the disparity surges, with Canadian women earning 43% less in additional compensation compared to men in 2020. When you look at above and beyond the salaries and get more into all the other pieces and compensation.
Half.
Yeah.
Half.
And I feel like that's a key thing that a lot of people don't negotiate. It's like, okay, the salary is the number one, but what about flexibility? What about the bonuses? What about the benefits? Earn days off, whatever it is, all those things add up.
Oh yeah. I work my butt off for you, like, and you get this many sales or like your percentage of increase. Yeah.
Right. They are seen as having the potential to make more money. Because I don't know why. What did I tell you the other day? The stat about how women are hired for what they have done and men are hired for what they can be.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. So we're having to prove ourselves constantly and showing in our resume. Those are all the things I've done. These are projects I've shown. This is the no gaps in my resume. And men, it's like, oh, you've only worked here for a year. It's okay. Like, we know you're going to be a star. So we're going to hire you anyway. Interesting. And not always the case. I'm just completely generalizing. But that was, again, like an Instagram quote that really struck a chord with me. Like, oh.
But isn't that true? Because even like you and I have faced that, where we get that like imposter syndrome because
100%.
The question is, what are your qualifications and what makes you eligible to speak about these things and all these things? Then we have to go back and like prove ourselves based on what we've done and not about, our momentum and
right. Or like
that
I know I'm going to be the best, so you should just hire me because I just know I have it in me. I can't even imagine pulling out that line at the job interview. Maybe I shouldn't, see what happens.
Honestly, I challenge you to do that in your next job interview.
But yeah, interesting. Yeah. So global data provided by LinkedIn covering 163 countries showed that while women account for 41.9% of the workforce, so almost half in 2023, the share of women in senior leadership positions, so directors, vice presidents, or the C-suite, is nearly 10% less than men. And while the proportion of women hired into leadership positions has been steadily increasing, like we chatted about 1% per year globally for the past 8 years, this trend reversed in 2023, regressing to 2021 levels.
Oh,
so less women are getting into those roles. And again, we're firm believers that you don't need to be in the C-suite or have those roles to be a leader, but
that impacts
impacts decision making, your pay, all those factors. And I don't know what happened this year, but
weird. That's very strange that it was specifically in 2020. Like, I feel like, we're making all these strides normally.
I think here it's maybe not the case in our city, because I've saw a lot of positivity that way.
Oh, of
for
course.
women,
Yeah.
but
Generalizing,
who knows?
though.
Yeah, in Canada. So in Canada, that's international stat. So across labor markets of the future, so STEM jobs, they are, as we probably all know, are typically remunerated very, very well. And these salaries are expected to grow in significance and scope in the future. Yet, LinkedIn data suggests that women remain significantly underrepresented in STEM at just 29.2%. So not even half of the jobs are held by women in STEM. And artificial intelligence, which we all know is a growing area. The percentage of women working today is approximately 30%, 4 percentage points higher than it was in 2016. So we're not getting any, the momentum there isn't increasing to a high degree of either.
That's slow. That's a slow burn. Yeah.
So this is all pretty sinister. We're all like, these are so sad.
Yeah.
And I know this is not
it's like
fun. It's depressing. I know.
Hopefully you're drinking wine too while you're listening.
Wine helps.
Yeah.
But we have come a significant way if you think about it, like from the 50s or, from a long, like 100 years ago, we have come a huge way. Actually, a 2023 study from the economists of the Royal Bank of Canada report that women's share of national income has increased from 25% to 42% since 1976.
Oh, I was like, that's such a huge difference, but that's a long time. I mean, it's good.
Yeah,
but still.
It is still long. But yeah, like from 25, like almost doubled. Which equals 240 billion.
I think if you think about like if we reach 100%, like that's so much more. That's not in our lifetime of working. Yeah.
It's something. But not quite enough.
Yeah.
Another study from last October found that the gender wage gap has been shrinking since 1998. On average, women earn 13 less per hour earned by men in 2018 compared to 18% less in 1998. So like I kind of mentioned, the rate that we're closing this gap is getting faster. Like it went real slow at the beginning, and now it's getting faster and faster as we bring more awareness to it, and we're doing things like this where we share the statistics and kind of the common factors that are causing it. But sadly, it's not happening fast enough. Like we said, it's going to take another 131 years to close it worldwide. So that is where we need to look at things from a global perspective and understand what's happening.
Yeah. So on that note, when we compare our situation in Canada to other places around the world, it's sort of hard for us to complain because we are doing relatively good. As Skye mentioned, in Canada, the federal government passed the Pay Equity Act in December 2018 and then came in effect in 2021, which requires federally regulated employers to establish and periodically update a pay equity plan. So that's great. Furthermore, Canada currently sits at number 30 on the Global Gender Gap Index, with Scandinavian countries like Iceland and Norway and Finland taking the top 3 spots. At the other end of the scale, the bottom 4 ranked nations of the 146 finalized in the Global Gender Gap Index were Guinea, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Chad, and Afghanistan. So in comparison to our 2022 ranking, we did, however, drop 5 points and are currently sitting at a gender equality score of 77%. So like not terrible, but not great.
Until we stop just having to discuss this, it's never going to be great.
No, yeah. On a global scale, the global gender gap score in 2023 for all 146 countries included stands at 68.4% closed. So considering the constant sample of 145 countries covered in the 2022 and then 2023 editions, the overall score changed from 68.1% to 68.4%, an improvement of 0.3% points compared to last year's edition. So like,
woohoo!
Yeah,
0.3%. It's not nothing. It's something, but where, and I think you'll get into this, but like what accounted for those changes? Because I don't know if I've seen them, but
no, when looking at the sample of 145 countries included in both the the 2022 and 2023 editions, results show that this year's progress is mainly caused by a significant improvement on the educational attainment gap and more modest increases for the health and survival and then political empowerment sub-indexes.
So more women are getting access to education around the world, which is huge.
And the political empowerment, however, I mean, just seeing what we see in the news, I don't know if 2024 is going to be a very good addition.
Yeah.
I think that might go down a little bit. So what are the Nordic countries, those countries that I mentioned that hold the top 3 spots? What are they doing that we aren't to be getting so close to closing the gap?
And let me just say Iceland, which is number 1, is currently at, I think, 91% closed. The gender gap is almost 91% closed.
Yeah.
So that is like, they're close. They're gonna be closing it in this lifetime, in like the next probably 30 years or hopefully sooner.
Yeah. So one of the first things is gender neutral parental leave. So the Nordic countries have implemented generous and flexible parental leave policies up to 480 days or 16 months of paid leave. That's in Sweden. That encourage both mothers and fathers, parents overall, to take time off work to care for their children. This helps in promoting a more equal distribution of caregiving responsibilities between parents. And I mean, arguably shows children that it's a dual, everyone has to
100%.
Participate.
Yeah.
So kind of just like a side story to that, there's actually something called the motherhood penalty and the fatherhood bonus. Research shows that women who have children generally pay a price when it comes to salary, while men may benefit from becoming fathers. So the majority of the gender pay gap worldwide opens up around the time of the birth of a first child. Interesting. This is the case even in some of the world's most equal societies like Scandinavia. A 2019 report found that motherhood earnings gap persists for at least 5 years after women return to work following the birth of a child. So like, sorry, buddy, you're not even out of the woods yet. The earnings gap is wider and lasts longer for women in the 25 to 29 age range than those who have children later.
Interesting.
Yeah. I wonder if just like because you're getting into
you haven't established maybe.
But men do not face similar penalties after becoming fathers. In fact, they tend to experience an increase in earnings, aka the fatherhood bonus. Whether this is because employers see fathers as harder working or more committed than non-fathers is up for debate and further study, but the fact remains that career costs of parenthood are largely placed on women. The reality that women earn less after becoming parents is connected to job shifts for positions with more family-friendly hours and policies, but job shifting may only be an option for mothers in that middle to upper level positions. Like most people can't just be like, I'm going to go switch a job and, decide, because you might be starting back at the bottom, even lower. And so furthermore, women in low-paid, precarious work situations may face steeper barriers after becoming mothers, as the same level of job flexibility is not available to them. I worked somewhere where and this was before we had the childcare subsidy. Yes. If people had more than one kid, they often didn't come back to work because the cost of childcare was so much more than that they were making, because we made very, very little. And it was so much more that they were like, I'm actually losing money coming back to work than I am just to stay at home with my kids. And
for sure.
Which is
so, I mean, not sad. Like, it's nice you can stay with your kids, but also like for the women that don't want to,
but that's like a choice that they don't want to make.
They don't even have that choice. It's just taking away that freedom or that freedom of choice.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to clarify, in Saskatchewan, we have this childcare subsidy for licensed establishments where it's, I think, $210 or $10 a day per month. So it's like $200 a month. However, in other provinces in Canada, they do not have the exact same situation. So like, it depends how much you make. Not everyone gets to get that $200. Like I have family in Calgary and they're like, no, we make too much, so we don't get the subsidy.
Oh,
whereas here in Saskatchewan, like everyone does, if you're at that, if your establishment is licensed and whatever by the government. So,
but not every establishment is licensed.
No, not everyone is, and they're in a long list to get licensed. So it's a whole thing. But still, happy it's here.
Yes, don't take it away.
No.
So the other thing that makes kind of that difference based on those Scandinavian countries is workplace flexibility. So policies supporting flexible work arrangements, such as part-time work, flexible hours, and remote work, allow individuals to balance work and family responsibilities. And this flexibility contributes to gender equality by accommodating diverse family structures and individual needs. I will say probably since the pandemic, I think this has probably shifted even in Canada. I know like my workplace, for instance, is very flexible. Mm-hmm. If my son has to stay home, it's like I can still like sort of do work from home and I don't get penalized for that. I mean, I also know that that's like a very specific situation, but I think for the most part, it has changed.
Yes, I think we have seen a shift in more flexibility.
Yeah. I think just mainly because like when people had to go home from the pandemic, everyone so many employers were like, no one's going to do anything. Mm-hmm. And in fact, work productivity increased. Right. Yeah. And so then they were like, oh, never mind. We have to be supportive of that.
But on the note of the pandemic, and I don't think we have any stats about it, but there was a significant drop in, and that might be why we saw a little bit of a gap and why we're not exactly where we should be. Mm-hmm. Because of women having to just drop out of the workforce. There were more higher unemployment rates for women than men during the pandemic. Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, pandemic, we're still in it. It's who knows when it's ever going to end, if it's ever going to end. And it's slowly women are getting back into the workforce. So again, all contributing to that gender gap.
Yeah, exactly. Another one is, which we just talked about in kind of brief, is childcare support. So accessible and affordable childcare services are crucial to enabling parents, particularly mothers, to participate fully in the workforce. Nordic countries invest in high quality, universal, affordable childcare facilities, making it easier for parents to reconcile work and family life, and having that balance. The next one is gender quotas. So some Nordic countries have implemented gender quotas for corporate boards and legislature, requiring a minimum percentage of women in leadership positions. This helps increase women's representation in decision-making roles and contributes to closing the gender pay gap. I know that there are going to be comments that the most qualified person should be there. It shouldn't be tokenized. Yeah. However, I see value and merit in this, and that yes, the most qualified person should be there, but also women bring very diverse experiences. Totally. And so, yeah.
And what about all the other genders too, right?
100%. Yeah, it's not just women, of course. Yeah. The next is equal pay legislation. So the Nordic countries have strong equal pay legislation that prohibits gender-based wage discrimination. These laws promote transparency in pay structures and encourage companies to regularly assess and address gender pay gaps, which I mean is sort of like what our Pay Equity Act is. Yeah. However, that's only for federally legislated or federal workers. Yeah. The next is gender equality initiatives. So ongoing initiatives and campaigns promote gender equality in the workplace. Whoop, whoop. Awareness programs, training, and education contribute to changing cultural norms and expectations surrounding gender roles and work. So in fact, in October of this year, Iceland, with the smallest gender pay gap in the world, as Skylar mentioned, instituted a Women's Day off, which is the 7th time that women in Iceland stopped working to call attention to gender inequality. 7th time. Yeah.
Must be working.
Well, yeah, obviously, if they have the smallest pay gap as well. It was the largest walkout by Icelandic women in almost 50 years, comparing to 1975, when close to 90% of Iceland's female population went on strike to demand gender equality. And this actually prompted Iceland's parliament to pass a law guaranteeing equal pay the following year. Nice. And this one actually also had I think the prime minister or the president, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the prime minister.
Of Iceland. Yeah, was on the front lines doing it.
Amazing.
Yeah. The second last one is education and training programs. So Nordic countries invest in education and training programs to encourage women to pursue careers in fields traditionally dominated by men. This helps break down occupational segregation and promotes gender balance in various professions.
This is interesting. Our universities need that. Some kind of, I don't know if they have it. I don't know about it if they do, but
just to even try it, Yeah. Try something. If you're I'm interested in, being an engineer or whatever it is. And having opportunities to walk a day in an engineer's shoes to see, just so you actually experience it. And then you're oh, this is actually not so scary. The last but certainly not least is transparent pay practices. So this is encouraging companies to adopt transparent pay practices to ensure that employees are aware of salary structures and can address any discrepancies based on gender. And I think actually BC and Ontario and Canada have done this where like, I don't know if it's necessarily based on gender, but it's transparent pay, meaning like if they're posting for a job, they have to post a salary range.
I've seen a lot more of this since I'm currently looking for a job.
Yeah. So what can we do to challenge or change these statistics?
Yeah, we have a lot to learn clearly from the Nordic countries. They're doing a lot of things. Like that was a long list of things that they're doing that are contributing. It's not just one thing. So there's so many things that'll go hand in hand to really fight the systematic issues, the unconscious biases that all go into creating this ever looming gender pay gap. So at a provincial level, government, we can push for enforced pay equity legislation across all sectors and workplaces. We can fight for increasing the minimum wage. We can fight for universal childcare, which we're very much on the road to currently. In this past year, we made huge waves on that. So those are some of the things on the government side that we should be looking at. Whoever's coming into government in the near future, those are things we want to be watching for.
And I mean, also like vote in that way. Like if these things are important to you, you can vote based on the things. And I'm not telling you how to vote, just that if these are things that are important to you, vote for the people who said that they're going to do something about it.
Yeah. Look for those things in their platforms. So from an organizational standpoint, at your own businesses and wherever your place of work is, some steps that companies can make to help close the gender pay gap are ongoing audits of compensation and gendered advancement opportunities. So actually, like, are we measuring this as a company? I don't know. Probably not in most places. Prioritization of workplace flexibility. And seeing this more and more because it is a pretty substantial value add, I think, for most people coming back from pandemic and working is like flexibility is almost as important as your salary. Improved parental leave policies, huge, and not many have this. Inclusive,
not like the like top up option or like, so I mean, and not that, you know, I'm trying to be greedy, but like when you make a certain salary and then you're like bumped down to like 50% of what you make, that's
not even 50.
I know, like that's a huge impact on your family and everything else. And like, I mean, you're not expected to move out of your house or like,
I know,
do
your
anything.
Bills get more because you have more humans living in your house, but you're expected to live. Honestly, I don't, my place of work didn't have top up, so you're just making your unemployment insurance essentially, and it's like 25% of what I used to be making. Like so like it's not even cutting it. You have to have savings, I'm telling you. Anywho, inclusive hiring practices is also a thing, and visibility of women in top jobs or, you know, those leadership positions. Upskilling and career growth opportunities for women, particularly in high growth and high earning sectors like STEM. And implementation of pay transparency policies. So those are all things that you should be looking for, chatting about, or pushing for in your organization to start doing. So again, what can you do? These are things the government can do. These are things that like organizations can do. But what exactly are you doing? Well, we talked about voting. That's the number one thing. When the next series of elections happen, look for that. Look for those pieces. Look for these, you know, platforms in your who you're voting for, who you're hoping to vote for, and all the candidates. Look for them and prioritize them as a part of, you know, what you're going to make your decision on. And if the aspects mentioned in the workplace aren't cutting it for you in your job, or if you're on the job hunt, bring these up with your leaders, bring these up with your HR teams, offer to write a business case to help push these policies forward. A lot of people are like, oh, we don't have time. Like, this is a long list of things. Well, no, like, I'll take the time, I'll do the work and provide you the data.
The statistics, the scaries, if you will.
On why it's important and why it's needed. Or create like a women's resource group within your organization and, you know, bring on the collective impact of a bunch of women coming together, because we all know more the two heads are better than one, et cetera, et cetera. So work together to make some huge, real lasting change in your organization on a number of those issues. So that's where we would suggest starting.
Just a few things to start tackling and get down to,
but it's quite a meaty issue that we're on the way but not quite there, and
Yeah.
Big things to fight.
We had a hard time trimming it down to make this episode under an hour. So stay tuned for definitely more on this in the future, and, diving into some of those more specifics and, aspects of the intersectionalities that exist, and even like sector focus and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Awesome. So, please do follow us on Instagram at racerco and at scaries.podcast, and on TikTok at racerco. And remember that change starts with action and awareness, which is what we're all about on this podcast. So thank you so much for being a part of the Scaries community and making the world a little less scary for it to be a woman to exist.
Bye.